registration statement, and then also information that pertains to the candidate herself or himself, where they live, to make sure that they are in fact living in the district. If anyone's interested in running, you can go onto the WASB, the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, and all the dates are there. So in the event there's a primary, there would have to be 5 people running for the 2 seats that are open, or that will be open. So if there are 4 people running, there's no primary. If there are 5 or more, there is a primary. And anyway, that's all I have. And the election is on April 1st.
And that stuff gets just dropped off here in the district office. Are there any special hours people should be aware of if they're gonna drop it?
The last day would be January 7th at 5 p.m.
Right. Now, obviously, if it's during the holiday break,
Right.
then anyone would have to wait until the school is back open after the holiday break or the winter break. So that's all I have.
Any CISA 2 updates?
No, other than CISA is having its meeting tonight, and fairly close to Madison.
Thank you for choosing correctly.
What?
Thank you for choosing correctly.
Of course. And anyway, that's all I have. Thank you.
Nicole, any WASB updates or legislative updates?
Sure, just a couple. WASB just sent corrections to the proposed resolution, so those are online now. The packet they sent in November just had some errors that they needed to edit. And a report came out about December property tax levies seeing an increase throughout the state because of the number of referendums, essentially due to inept state funding. And when I was with Ryan yesterday, we were just talking about a bunch of stuff. And if funding would have been aligned with inflation since the 90s, we'd have an extra $2 million a year. So it was an extra $3,200 a student. Wow. And that just, it's a lot. And they did set the Senate members for the Joint Finance Committee. So now is the time for supporters of public schools now through basically the spring to look to advocate for increased state funding. And then the only events coming up is EdCon in January. That's it.
Right. Thank you. Nicole, you want to just keep us going? We'll hear the treasurer's report.
Of course.
The payment of accounts payable bills.
All right, 1 second here. All right, I'd like to present the treasurer's report dated November 2024. I'll read the ending balance for each of our accounts. The CSB operating account with a balance of $935,278.86. Our CSB Flex account with a balance of $35,051.53. Petty cash with a balance of $300. LGIP with a balance of $405,362,000.65. WISC with a balance of $4,198,748.42. For a grand cash and investment asset total of $5,574,741.46, and a Fund 10 and 27 asset total of $570,188.92. As for accounts payable, I will present the accounts payable bills dated November 1st through November 30th, 2024. This includes paper checks numbered 72939 through 73019, wire transfer checks numbered 2024-00415 through 2024-00606, and ACH checks numbered 2425-00022 through 2425-00030 for a total of $883,526.90.
Ryan, you want to take us through the?
For the overall revenue, not a whole lot to report this month. Again, we're pretty much in line with a similar pace to last year. You'll notice for November, we did get one of our first general aid payments of 1.2 million. And so we're a little bit higher in revenue than opposed to last year again, because we got an extra 200,000 in revenue this past year from the state for our first payment. As for the expenses, again, we're still a little bit behind. I misspoke last month. Our 3-month payment was not December of this month. It's actually January. I was off by 2 days or whatever. So we will be caught up. Right now, you can see our expenses are lagging a little bit behind. But again, that's because we are not getting our third payment until January. So once we get that, it'll be pretty much in line with where we were last year at this point.
I noticed I got my tax statement in the mail,
Yeah.
and I noticed there was a specific area there. It said the school taxes for our grade school, Salem Grade School, Salem School District, went down. So
Everything else must have went up even more then.
yeah, I know. But anyway, I thought that was good.
And then, any questions at all for Nicole or Ryan? Jack? No, okay. And then we have also the minutes that were attached from the November 19th, 2024 regular school board meeting. Can I please have a motion to approve the consent agenda items?
I move to approve the consent agenda items A through D as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. We have no visitors this evening. All right. Vicki, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, I'm excited about this conversation. Patty and I have been putting this together for the board just to give you an update on some of the things that we have been doing. We're going to call this topic instructional rounds. We will discuss what those are and how they're being implemented in the school. And if you have questions, we would be happy to answer these. And as a teacher, I was afforded the great opportunity to do this practice. I had a really great principal who, not just as a brand new baby teacher, but throughout, when I was in Palatine and then went to Barrington, it was the expectation for all of the teachers to take time to push into other classrooms. So whether that was doing our plan or PLC time, as districts call it, so professional learning communities, or our plan time, or in some times throughout the year, the principal would set aside a sub so that I would have time to go in and visit a variety of classrooms. And there were things that he or she, depending on the principal I was working for, wanted me to look for. And those were typically things that had been discussed and talked about at professional learning community committee meetings or in services. And so we're going to be talking about how that's starting to look here at Salem and how we're using them and why we're excited about the work we're doing with them. This is connected to goal 1 and 2 of our strategic plan. We're going to be talking about how we are helping ensure our students are receiving relevant and rigorous evidence-based educational experiences through professional learning communities. And then we're also going to be talking about how this helps build a sense of school community, specifically our tactic under implementing teacher leadership opportunities.
Okay, so we have talked about numerous times that our overall growth is pretty stagnant and has been since 2018. So the graphic that you're seeing is showing data from New Zealand. And what you're seeing is the lower left quadrant is low relationships and low teaching skills. So teachers who are in that area. Above that is low relationships and high teaching skills. And the bottom right is high relationships, low teaching skills. And then we want to be in that upper right quadrant of high relationships and high teaching skills. That's where high impact learning is happening. So you can see the lack of learning that will still happen even if there is high teaching skill, if we're not building relationships. But high relationships is not enough to guarantee student learning. They need to be paired. We can't rely on just one or the other. So what we're doing is trying to be more intentional about any changes that we're making. That's part of the instructional rounds process. We don't want to do a trial and error, trying to think, well, we know relationships are important, so let's put all our eggs in that basket. We want to collect data and figure out what are the things that are happening, so we know what things are not happening, so we know what to focus on.
So to help us with this examination of the root causes, again, trying not to bounce around from idea to idea or course correct too swiftly, whether we course correct when we hear feedback that a particular curriculum isn't working and we pivot and we realize it's not the curriculum, or we course correct thinking that it's this new idea that has been out there and try to implement it. So instead of doing that, we're having our teams examine root causes. We have 2 teacher leader groups we want to talk about to identify areas that are going to have the biggest impact on student learning. An administrative council, we're calling it ADCO. This was developed in May. Part of the reason we're looking at this is ensuring, back to our strategic plan, that we were developing teacher leaders. And so I want to show you on here, the purpose of the administrative council is to ensure that all of our district staff are included in decisions and help us in that cascading message within all of our departments. You can see some of the current work we're doing in our administrative council. We are looking at our 2025-26 calendar that we'll be providing for you, and I'll be giving it to you in a board update here soon to see some of the options that we have been thinking through as a building here. We've also started analyzing our Great Places to Work survey data that we gave last year. This was an anonymous survey, and teachers were given the option to insert specific types of feedback. And so we've been diving into that. And then right now we've started doing instructional rounds. We're going to talk about the first teacher that I've done this with in a little bit. But you can see the members that we have with the idea to make sure that we're reaching a broad audience in this administrative council. We want feedback from everywhere, but you'll see we have even our custodians and paraprofessionals and our library staff represented. So that's one group that is looking at specifically this topic of instructional rounds.
The other group are the department chairs. We have most areas covered right now. We're still building the team. So you'll see science is not there. We're still seeking someone for that position. But what we are doing is trying to ensure that all teachers have a colleague, a knowledgeable colleague to go to for instructional support, assistance in their instruction. And they're helping to build the course guides, aligning standards and assessments, helping to monitor that work. And right now we are starting to dig into high impact strategies that could be used across the board, regardless of if you're teaching 8th grade or kindergarten. There are some instructional practices that are strong across the board. So we're doing some learning about that and then creating what we're calling a playbook of those strategies so that if a new teacher comes in, is struggling with a particular issue, we can say, here, try this strategy, let me partner with you on that.
If you're curious about some of those things, while we're talking, if you go to the end of the slide deck, you're gonna see some of the things that we're working on. We'll talk about more about
Yeah, and I just had a quick question. Do department chairs interact with administrators with regards to evaluation?
No, not at all. They're
Okay.
completely non-evaluative.
Okay, thank you.
They're only there for support.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Everything's a little sticky. One more last piece on some of the background before we dive into some of this other works. We have been intentionally trying to create more visibility with staff. This started in the beginning of my tenure here. Again, going back to even my experience as a teacher, just seeing my building principal, superintendent, visiting the classrooms quite frequently. So I started early on being in spaces throughout the year for the purpose of like building a sense of safety. If they start to see administrators or me in spaces more often, the kids will get used to me and teachers won't feel panicked. So I'm not in there to evaluate. Right now, I'm just in there to see what's going on. This particular year, I put in an expectation that we are going to be monitoring and collecting data on our visits, because what we value we're going to monitor and check in on. And so there are specific people at the district level and our building level that I want to make sure that are in classrooms very regularly for the same reason, to create that safety, but also so we can quickly start to identify the needs that we're starting to see in the classroom spaces. It has also been helpful in us identifying, and when we talk about these instructional rounds, some of the reasons we chose areas that we wanted to target.
Okay, so what are instructional rounds? They are a brief informal observation of a classroom, and they're very targeted. We're looking for one specific thing. So when we're doing an instructional round with teachers, we will have them identify one criteria that they're looking for. So we might go in and say we're looking for a particular engagement practice, or we're looking for how often are students responding and how often are teachers talking. So it's a very targeted, they're not just in there to see everything that's happening in a classroom, because sometimes then the focus becomes something other than instruction. So we give a very specific target. We are doing these to gather data. We want to find out, instead of guess, what is going well, what's working, and what areas are we seeing in common that might not be happening. And the more eyes that are on that, the better. We might go into a room one day and see this practice is happening, but that practice was happening because they were being observed. So if we're repeatedly in classrooms and we have more eyes seeing what's happening, then those practices will become more common. So currently, as we've said, we've got district and building leadership teams doing walkthroughs, ADCO and department chairs, and then Barb Geibel is working with our new teachers, getting them in as many classrooms as possible, just to see different ways of engaging with kids, even if it's off grade level or off subject area. That's me too. And that reminded me actually, so last year we had our intermediate leadership team, our literacy leadership team, do some learning about instructional rounds with our CESA 6 trainer, and had the opportunity a couple of times to go on walkthroughs. So we've had a few experiences with it in the past, and now we're able to bring that forward with more teachers. So right now, what's happening, we have had within our administrative district team 1,034 reported instructional rounds, and there have been additional that not all of us are good about entering the data. So there are many additional unreported rounds. Department chairs are doing these instructional rounds and looking for specific practices, looking for implementation fidelity. Carrie Galley, for example, for our new literacy curriculum, is going in to check if the structures are in place, and if they're not, what do we need to do to provide support? Which leads to that next piece of, if we can see what's happening or not happening, we know where teachers need support and where they don't. So with what is coming next, we are working with both administration and teaching staff to build a common understanding of even just the vocabulary of consistency, coherence, engagement, rigor. Some of those are bad words to teachers. After a while, you get tired of hearing the word rigor, but what does it actually mean? What are we looking for? And we will be reviewing the data from our rounds to determine impact. So what impact are we seeing just from doing the rounds themselves? Teachers going and seeing other teachers do amazing things, they'll start doing amazing things. So we have that impact to measure, and then help to determine what next steps are in place. And my personal favorite, we're identifying what we'll call lab classrooms for strong instructional practices. So there might be a teacher who is amazing at asking deep questions of young learners. And we might want to demonstrate that practice and increase that practice. Not everyone thinks that kindergartners can think deeply, but if you question in a certain way and continue to pursue that, they can think very deeply. And we've got some amazing teachers doing that work. So we're targeting specific practices, not just teachers we think are overall amazing, but teachers who are really good at one particular thing.
And again, if you want to see some of those things, keep going in the slide deck. One of the things we know is, like, another reason why we're doing this is we understand that education, it can be very stagnant, and sometimes we unintentionally get stuck in a repetitive pattern. And we've built things in place, like our structures in place. Part of the strategic plan was to make sure we have the master schedule allows for professional learning across grade levels and teams. So, but how are we intentionally using that collaboration time? Are we being intentional about the goals and the focus? So that will be the next step, as we talked about, is we have the time, how are we utilizing that time? Here's one of the, so this is the first person that teacher from the ADCO that has started to do these. She said in her 20 years, this was the first time that she's had this opportunity to do this intentionally, where I worked with, we got her a sub, took 90 minutes, gave her a list of, before we met, all the ADCO has a list of the different strategies we're looking for them to be able to pick, because to Patty's point, it could be very overwhelming. You walking into a classroom, if you don't have a focus, you're just looking at anything and everything. The other piece that I told the administrative council is if they've been picked to be on this leadership team, my expectation of them is that we're not going to put our head in the sand. We're going to look for things that we can be doing better. Because when you have these conversations, teachers don't want to feel like, well, I don't want to find anything that's not going wrong. I'm not asking for us to find what's going wrong. What we need to do is, though, find the areas we can get better. And so when you give them specific things, and out of this conversation with Lindsay, she's like, okay, maybe I didn't actually see it in this room, but I maybe saw it if I went in a different day, like that quick, caveat, it might be happening another time. But it was this opportunity for her to see really strong practices. She stopped at a 4K classroom, and to Patty's point, that would be a space where I'd want to send a number of teachers to, because the metacognition that happens in a 4K classroom is astounding. We teach those 4K students how to think about their thinking so naturally, and then we, as they matriculate through the grades, sometimes we think they can't do it anymore. Go look at a 4K classroom. These teachers are teaching them how to think about why and what they're doing so brilliantly. And she got to see that particular day. I asked if I could put in her quote, because she wrote me an email as soon as that was over. But I'm excited about where we're going. This is the first, if she hasn't done it in 20 years, we're being very intentional about our instructional rounds. And it took, when I first got here, it took the time to build up that safety, so when people see us in the classroom, it's not a scary thing. And having these conversations with our teachers so they can start to be challenging to one another as well.
In gathering this information, I guess I have two questions. How are all these data fields, if you will, being assessed, evaluated, and then on a long-term basis, how is it all put together to come up with the pattern that we should be doing? Either we're already doing it, or we need to do more of those things in the future.
It's a good question.
Yeah, same. I saw 1,034. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
How do you gather the data, and then how do you
Yeah.
analyze it, right? Like, what do you do with all that information?
It's a slow process.
Yeah.
And that's why we're targeting such specific things, because if you just gather everything for every purpose, you won't have actionable data. So we are targeting specific practices. They are linked here in your slideshow. Each of the images is linked to the actual document, so you can go in and look. We're starting with a few of Marzano's instructional strategies, and there are specific look-fors there, and then the engagement strategies as well. So we're just starting there, and we'll build as we gather data on that to decide, are these the right areas for us to focus on, or are there other areas that are going to have a bigger impact?
And I would love to like add on to that conversation if that's okay.
Yeah, of
Like,
course.
so one of the things after, so you saw that 1,000 number. So first that 1,000 number really was this year, the expectation we're all in classrooms. Like I've been in them, we've been in them sporadically throughout. Now my expectation is I need you in there, like I need you in there, I need you visible. So that for a first couple of months, it was just people, we're not necessarily looking for specific things, we're in there building safety, that now you see so many of us all of the time, not just Vicki and maybe not just an occasional AP or director, you're seeing us all the time. Then we had an extended cabinet conversation where we started to talk about, all right, so what are some of the things we're noticing when we're in there? What are the relationships teachers have with students? Like how do we know if the teacher and student know each other well? In those brief interactions, can you tell if a teacher knows a student well? Also, when we're in those rooms, what is the evidence that there is an engaged classroom? And that looking for that metacognition without saying in that extended cabinet, we're looking for metacognition. We're looking for purposeful struggle. And so we've had this thing on my whiteboard in the office for a while, like here's the things we started to look for. And then identifying which teachers do we see some of these practices just naturally happening. And we started writing those on the board. Like those would be in our head. Those are gonna be the labs that we can go. Then for right now with ADCO, they just get these 4 things in their email, the 4, and they pick what they want to look at. Because these are the 4 things to me that are really important. I want like cognitively complex tasks. I want them really intentional activities. Well, what does that look like? And so we built out, like we need to build it out, but I walked through what does those things look like. And then we've got examples of some of the teachers that we've seen and to talk about that. And I know in my mind, when they say, I'm kind of interested in X, Y, and Z, I helped Lindsay, like we could go see these particular people. What I would like us to see is once we start doing explicit training with teachers, that the department heads are working in tandem with ADCO, that we can start to say, we were in your room and here's what we saw. So we'll first start to see it more often, more frequently, because now we're intentional. I think the other thing that I believe will be another thing that starts to leverage and increase our impact is when, and it could just be the way my brain thinks, but if I knew I was a classroom that someone identified as having, I allowed really good purposeful struggle and like thinking. We have a brand new baby teacher, Jacob LaForest. He nails it all the time. Like lets kids struggle in such a good, deliberate way, doesn't answer that question. If I was him and I knew my room was the reason that teachers were coming, I would want to nail that craft even more all of the time. And so I feel like as we start to find these pockets of teachers and recognizing them in, I would say, even more meaningful ways than sometimes we've been recognizing teachers, that it'll start to elevate the entire building. And I'm hoping we'll start to see that translate into assessment, and I'm hoping we'll start to see that into engagement. Our attendance increases because when learning is like rigorous and engaging, people want to be in that space. So that's some of the ways that I'm going to start to use those data.
Well, it reminds me of almost like a positive deviant study, right? You're studying like the healthiest of the hardest grade or class, and then learning what they're doing and spreading that along, right? And I would think that this would be a practice that is just continual because things change and you're going to have to be fluid, and something that worked last year might not work 2 years from now. So is this kind of a
Oh yeah, this is
forever
not
thing?
going away.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
That's awesome.
And you feel like the trust with the teacher, I would assume that would have been really hard at
Didn't
first
have that, yeah.
to have you guys in their rooms, right?
Yeah, that it's not evaluated. Like we're
Right.
in here. We're in here to learn what we could be doing better,
Right.
and then identifying the thing. Because when we looked at data since 2018, when we had that board committee meeting, if we've not seen growth, and it's now that growth, it's just been flat. Like we've flatlined. what can we do differently? So that's why we need to do like a really deep dive into what we need to be doing differently. And it could just be, it's not because we don't have great teachers, they might just need some opportunities to see some really strong instructional practices that, like we know these Marzanos have, these strategies, they've got the data on them. There's evidence-based, and so let's amplify that in more spaces.
Well, and also this is, once that trust was built, right? This is probably a support arm that our teachers haven't ever had, right? Like, they're able to, they're being listened to, and they're being set up for success, right?
And getting to see each other.
Right.
And they can say, I'm struggling with this thing. Do you know someone who is doing really well at it? It's what Barb is doing right now with our new teachers. She will go and cover their classroom, talk to them about what they're looking for, put them in a classroom for observations with someone who's really strong. So we've already got that built in, and that will just continue to expand, not just new teachers, but anyone who's looking to make an improvement.
I mean, the most effective workspaces are the safe ones, where you can just come out and say, I'm struggling with this, without fear of, why don't you know this? Or fear of not even having answers to your struggle, so.
Has there been any feedback from parents with regards to this process that we are now going through?
I haven't heard that. I mean, the thing I hear from parents is how, like, their kids know like they know all, like district off, like because
Because you're roaming around.
So it makes it nice when I'm talking to parents or they have questions or when they like, oh, I know so-and-so, or they've seen Ryan still in space. Like, so they feel this sense of we're all in it. It does help that we're all, down the
Sure.
hall. There is that. So, and I get that bigger districts can't always do that, but I don't know that the parents are saying they're seeing the outcome of this per se, except that they're seeing the tangential safety piece that we're in the space with the kids.
Right, but over a period of time, they will,
Yeah,
I mean, everyone will see the changes, so things are no longer flatline or continue to grow.
That's
Build.
our hope.
I think what I love, and Patty, you alluded to this, is like, stop chasing shiny objects, right? Like, let's get really good at our craft. We have a whole building of professionals.
Right.
Like reading curriculum, they're gonna come and like the pendulum swings.
Yep.
And I think this avoids the like, this too shall pass mentality of like, here's another new initiative from the administration. Like, it's like, no, let's just get really good at our practices that we have control over. And if the state standards change, they change, but we can adapt because we have like sound practices, like a toolkit, right? Like,
That's exactly it. We just finished our science of reading training for K2, and they're now seeing, like, this lives in our curriculum. Oh, this great instructional practice is already there. I now understand it better. I've learned this practice because I've been teaching it. I just didn't know what it was. So now they can take that good instructional practice, no matter what curriculum it is, no matter what book they're doing.
those are gonna change all the time.
Implement
Yeah,
it,
right.
right. So if we're focusing on those strategies, then it doesn't matter what tool they use to teach it.
Awesome.
So thanks for letting us. We're excited
No,
about
it's
this.
great.
I'm excited, this is great.
That's great.
Yeah.
Committee reports they're linked in there. And if I can add them to the board report this week, because I know you want to read those over your winter break.
We have our next board meeting. It says 2025 on there. That's wild. January 28th, 2025, right here. There will be some committee meetings prior to that.
Oh, sorry for that.
That's okay. No, it's all good. At this point, I will,
It says the next board meeting date is the 21st.
Oh, is it?
I think it would be the 21st, right? Isn't it the 3rd?
Well,
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
just
I
looking,
wanted it to be the 28th in my mind because of, yep, you're right, it is the 21st.
because the 28th is,
Oh, but it's because I wouldn't be able to go the 21st, because that'll be the delegate.
The EdCon.
They usually do it
Yeah.
the night before.
What does it say on?
let's see what my.
the 28th, I have that, but then, because it's normally the fourth Tuesday, except November and December.
So maybe we
I have the
pushed it
28th on
back
my
last year.
calendar.
Okay, so we must have pushed it back maybe because of EdCon or something last year.
Okay.
This was, I didn't
Okay,
change.
so the 28th?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So you were right.
Okay.
All right, can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting at 6:38?
I motion to adjourn the meeting at 6:38.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.
Jack, how are you doing? Good, good.
They have service, but I gave this.
Have a good
Thank
Christmas,
you.
Jack.
See you, Jack.